Congressional Candidate Forum for the evening. Please welcome the candidates for Congressional District 52. So candidates, I know you have already received the rules of engagement. I'll just refresh you briefly. We have 2 minutes for opening statements each and 1 minute for answers. We will start alphabetically for the opening statement, and closing statements will start in reverse order. And with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce our first candidate, Jackie Atkinson.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you for everyone coming tonight. It is an honor to speak before you and hopefully earn your support. Some of you know me. I am a LAPA member. I've been around. I'm a delegate in the Republican Party. A lot of you also know that I was a combat veteran. I served several tours in combat in the United States Marine Corps by the time I reached captain. And I was honored to be one of the first female combat engineer officers in the Marine Corps. But I'm also a businesswoman. So a lot of you don't know about my business expertise. But I got out of active duty service about 10 years ago, and I got into a small business. And that small business specialized in mitigating the threats of improvised explosive devices, the IED, otherwise known as the roadside bomb. Because, and I know just like Juan Hidalgo, he saw this. We lost too many service members to this disgusting device. So I got out, we addressed this problem. I grew my company from 2 million to 75 million in less than 4 years. And I'm proud to say that I just returned $17 million to the taxpayer because of accountability and streamlining. So I have real world experience, not only in small business, large business, serving my country, but also streamlining Congress and streamlining acquisition through Congress responsibly. So I ask you for your support. I look forward to tonight. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you. Mike Canada.
Good evening, how are you? I'm Mike Canada. I've been a Coronado resident primarily for the last 28 years. 10 years as a bachelor while serving in the United States Navy, and 20 years, almost, as a family man, wife, and 3 children. I've also studied international law and taxation law at the University of San Diego, and I'm currently a professor in air transportation and unmanned aerial systems. With regards to foreign policy, we're at a real crossroads right now. We have Islamic terrorism knocking on our door. We don't have the means, the funds, or the will right now to fight. It's very readily apparent. The Obama administration is not backing us, and Congress is doing nothing on that point as well to engage. I too, like Jackie, served 4 combat tours as a drone pilot and a mission commander. I saw what happened out there. The rules of engagement did not benefit the fighting man. And it's a disgrace. A good friend of mine, on my last tour, somebody who was, we shared a bond together, was killed by a blue on green attack. We don't understand the problem, and we never will unless we get people in office who can take care of the problem. Tax is a mess. The tax code's too big, too onerous, nobody can understand it. I've studied tax law, I can get around the system. Education, immigration, they go together. Right now we're looking at H-1B visas to replace American workers because they can't find the proper people here who are educated. It just can't be done. And lastly, veterans, close to my heart. I'm a disabled veteran, and I see what's happening. Please, if you want to know more about me, MikeCanadaForCongress.com. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Denise Gitson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by thanking both of my colleagues, I guess, almost. My opponents, I guess, on the stage, but in life, Jackie Atkinson and Mike Canada are 2 brave folks who stood up and answered the call of duty. And while we may be opponents on the stage, when your country called, you answered that, and I always stand with you. So thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's such a pleasure to be here tonight. As the daughter of immigrants, I understand so much of what the Latino community feels when they come to this country. And you might have heard that once upon a time, when I was 22 years old, I worked for Governor George W. Bush on the Bush campaign in Austin, Texas. And I was offered a position that I'm very proud to talk about, and that was to be the Hispanic Coalition's director. I felt so at home in that regard because I was able to connect with the Latino community in a way that I feel like Republicans often stood away from and stepped back from and were afraid to engage. And I grew up in the Valley, up in Northern California. I grew up near Travis Air Force Base, where my dad served 20 years in the Air Force. And I grew up surrounded by the Latino community. My best friend when I was in first grade was Cuca, and that was her nickname. And I grew up loving the community, knowing the community, and for me it was such a natural engagement with that community because you are the epitome of the American dream. There's no job that's beneath you. There's no job that's too hard, and every day you contribute in such meaningful ways to our community. So I just want to thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here as a Republican who has always enjoyed the privilege of talking to you about values that you already share with us, because we know that Republican and Democrat, those labels may try to divide, but ultimately we agree on much more than we disagree on. And so thank you for this opportunity tonight. I look forward to talking about the issues.
Good evening. My name is John Horst. I was about 2 years old when my father moved us here. He retired as a Navy captain. So that makes me a retired brat, I guess. I grew up here. We settled in Chula Vista, South Chula Vista. We could see the hills of Tijuana from our front yard, and I was the paper boy for the San Diego Union back in the day. I've grown up with the community here in San Diego, and I was just sharing with my counterparts in what I call the green room over there. I was just sharing with them how when our family gets together, it looks like the United Nations. I mean, we've got Armenian, we've got Jordanian, we've got Mexican, we've got Chinese, we've got American from Germanic background. And I can tell you something. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a Germanic voter. I see an American voter. And I suspect that you all feel the same way, whether you come from a Latino background or any other background, with might be Chinese or any other ethnicity. You don't see that ethnicity when you look in the mirror. You see an American voter. One of the things that I'm really proud of in this district is that we are, give or take a point here and there, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Independent. We are probably the most diverse ethnically in the entire country. We're one of the most diverse economically in the entire country in terms of congressional districts. In this district, you can't run to the base, you can't run far to the left and just talk with people who think like you. You can't run far to the right and just talk to people who think like you. You have to talk to everybody. I am the only candidate in this race, and I believe that I will demonstrate this tonight, that is going to be able to compete with Scott Peters for every single vote in this district.
Thank you. We're going to start with Ms. Atkinson. What can be done so that young men and women that join the military today will not be the homeless vets of tomorrow?
Thank you for that question, whoever posed it, because this is near and dear to my heart. And we've talked about these issues, and I've talked about it. One of my 3 platforms is veterans care. So there are a number of issues. We have one of the highest ratios of homeless veterans. We also have the highest number of post-9/11 vets in San Diego. That's in the entire nation, the highest population. And a lot of our homeless vets, or a lot of the vets coming back and getting out of service, you don't see them quite on the streets yet. You know why? Because they're couch surfing with their friends still. It's a serious issue. So what I want to do when I get in office is we need to absolutely reform the VA. And I'll do that on day 1. I'll work in order to ensure that the bureaucracy and all the leaders in charge of the VA are held accountable for the disgraces that they've committed, and ensure that no veteran is on the waiting list more than 5 days. And if so, they should be able to seek health care anywhere, any doctor. So I'll start that in day 1. Thank you.
Mr. Canada.
I have a different perspective here. I'm a disabled vet, and I've had to take on the VA numerous times. And thankfully, every time I've taken them on, I've won. The VA has a system that beats you down. It's administratively ridiculous. People give up in despair because they don't have the help that they need. And that's why they're homeless. I hear a lot about homeless vets. I hear a lot about vets who are not getting care. The problem is, we're not rooting out the system. We're not taking care of the people and holding them accountable. There was an idea that floated today that treat all new employees at the VA like at-will employees, and I believe that's a good idea. That way you get rid of the people who are causing trouble, but moreover, we need to get to the top and get rid of the leadership that's failing our veterans every day. It pains me to see these people on the streets, not getting the medical care they need, and we should all be ashamed of it, because we all, as a community, need to do more about it. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson?
It is a travesty that we ever allow any veteran to come home from laying their life on the line for us, and that we don't do everything in our power to make sure they get the health care they need, they get the support they need to transition back into society, and that they are treated with respect by all of us. And so this is an interesting issue for me because in OIF 1, I was dating a guy who was a Special Forces Marine Corps officer, and when he came back, he had severe PTSD. And because of the culture of the Marine Corps at that time, and because of the healthcare, because we were just figuring it out in 2003, there was very little that we could do for him. But for his family support, he would have been one of those people who was homeless. So this is not something that's endemic to one sector of veterans or another. This is something we have to address system-wide, and it needs to become a priority because the veterans deserve our strongest and best care.
Thank you. Mr. Horst?
When you take a job in the federal government, you go on, and this is the case right now, no, it doesn't matter what department you work for, you go on probationary status for 1 year. And during that 1 year probationary status, you are an at-will employee. You send me to Congress, I'm going to write a bill, and I can tell you the bill probably won't be more than 2 or 3 pages. We are going to return every single employee in the Department of Veterans Affairs to probationary status for 1 year. Because that then allows the leadership to clear out the people who should not be in their employment. And that will allow those who are really doing well to really shine and thrive. We need to get rid of the dead weight so that the folks who really want to do a good job for our veterans are free to do that. Send me to Congress. It's just going to take 2 or 3 pages. We're going to put them all back on probationary status. And by the way, once we do that, that will be the big one of earthquakes in the federal bureaucracy, let me tell you. All the other departments are going to get religion really quick. I'm thinking of the Immigration Department in particular. I'll say more about that later.
Mr. Horst, you'll lead off with this next question. What is your position on the Common Core curriculum?
Kill it. Okay. Common Core, I've done a lot of reading and research on standardized testing. Let me also tell you something about what they're really driving at. Common Core is built by and for the testing industry. Okay? It was built by and for the testing industry. And the testing industry, they create these tests that they create this norm, and then they tell us where our kids are against that norm. I went with my son, who's now a high school senior, when he was in 3rd grade. We went to the public library and we asked to see the reading list. We were shocked. It was books that my son had read in 1st grade. So if they're comparing my son against a norm in 3rd grade that's more suitable for a 1st grader, well, to quote Hillary Clinton, at this point, what difference does it make? Common Core is an effort by the testing industry to hijack our educational establishment, and we've just got to put an end to it. These tests do not tell us anything about whether our kids are prepared for the future.
Thank you. Ms. Gitchum?
The real issue that we're talking about in this election is not specific to any one government program or another. Common Core is just one way of saying this is federal intervention in an issue that should be a local and state matter. And it doesn't matter what you interchange that with, whether it's Common Core or any other federal program that's being jammed down the throats of parents and communities to decide what's best for their students and their children. There are folks that I've talked to. I've visited with an elementary school, Adobe Bluffs in Poway, and the principal there said, what do you think about Common Core? Do you like it? He said, yeah, we actually kind of like it. And I said, really, you're the first person I've ever met who said that, but you're entitled to your opinion. do you think the federal government should be the one that tells you whether or not you should have Common Core? And he said, never thought of it that way, but no. So regardless of where you fall on the merits of the program, whatever that program may be, what matters is whether or not federal government gives you back your choice-making decision to decide what's best for your children and your community and your schools. Thank you.
Mr. Canada.
A subject near and dear to my heart. I have 3 school-age children. Common Core, again, as Mr. Horst said, is an attempt for the testing industry to hijack the educational system, but it's doing more than that. It's dumbing down the system. My goodness, I mean, I go into a classroom now, and I see teachers who aren't allowed to use their craft to teach a child, and they're keeping them to a standardized test. That's, as I've said before, that's asinine, absolutely asinine. And on top of that, I'm a college professor, and I see the product that I'm getting from the high schools. It's ridiculous. Common Core is nothing more than a way for the federal government, and by the way, the federal government is not allowed to mandate an educational standard. It's a way to bully people in and blackmail people in through a funding mechanism to dumb down our kids. This is absolutely ridiculous. I would make sure that we put legislation through that would disallow this and get our educational system back on track. Thank you.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to keep it short and simple. Like I said, I was a United States Marine. I would absolutely get rid of Common Core. You're going to hear this tonight based on many questions. I'm a true Republican that believes in limited government. So we need to get rid of Common Core and get the federal government out of our schools. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson, you'll lead off with this next question. Please tell us your professional supporters, who your campaign has engaged, and who your endorsers are.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. So first, I just want to set the record straight, and I want to say that there are 4 of us up here who claim to be Republicans, but one of us was actually a registered Democrat for 4 years, from 2008 to 2012. And so when somebody calls themselves something that they're not, I want to make sure that we're all very clear as to who that is, and that's Jackie Atkinson. And so somebody who registered to vote against John McCain and a Republican agenda and ushered in this nightmare that we've had for the last 7 years in President Obama. That aside, my consultant is Jason Rowe of Revolvis. He's my strategist. My fundraiser, I've got a campaign staff over here. I have Brooke, raise your hand. I have Chuck. I have Micah as my volunteer coordinator. And I've got another woman who used to work for me at my PR company that I've brought on board. I also have a fundraiser in Washington, D.C., and we are in the process of hiring a finance director to come in-house. As you know, fundraising is a huge part of the campaign, and we have done a remarkable job raising $425,000 over the last 5 months to amplify our message and beat Scott Peters. Finally, I think you said endorsements. I'm working on the final endorsement of Kathy McMorris Rogers, who is the highest ranking woman in Congress. I have Chris Kate, Mark Kersey, Scott Sherman, the 2 past regional chamber CEOs, and I'm proud to have their support both locally here and also in Washington, D.C. Thank you. I'm also the only NRCC endorsed young gun in this program, on this stage. Thank you.
Ms. Atkinson.
Yes. Well, first, if I can get time to address, I absolutely was a registered Democrat. I think there's a lot of people in here that are registered Democrats. But you know what? I believe in integrity. I was a United States Marine Corps officer, and I will stand up here and I will tell you, I absolutely voted for John McCain. I stood by John McCain, and I supported his campaign and voted for him. But I'm not ashamed that I used to be a registered Democrat. But Denise just registered as a Republican last year. So if you're going to send out lies, she was not registered as a Republican last year. I am endorsed by Pete Wilson. I have the support of Carl DeMaio and many local leaders. 100% of my funding has been right here. And I have not pandered to special interest groups. I have not acted as a DC insider like a DC lobbyist. I have walked doors, thousands of doors in the last year. And I have the support of veterans and people like you, Democrats, Republicans, and declined estates. Thank you.
Can I respond?
No, because she responded to yours. Mr. Canada.
I'm really new at this process, as you probably guessed. You haven't heard about me before tonight. So, my endorsement, I have to say, is my wife. First and foremost, Caroline. She has had the faith and the gumption, and let me tell you something. I mean, she keeps me in line too. My last debate was like, wow, that was my introduction into politics. But let me tell you, I've got Bob Schuman back here, who, God bless him, has really worked his behind off to get me here. And my endorsement are the hundreds of people have said, Mike, you should run for Congress. The people I've helped out, filling out their taxes, serving in combat zones with, working with. We can't shut you up, Mike. Why don't you run for Congress? So that's what I'm doing here tonight. I'm asking you for your vote. I'm asking you for your endorsement. I know I'm new in the game, but I'm here to stay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Horst.
I commissioned the poll. It was at my dinner table and I won. And that was the only poll I needed. I was actually talking to my wife about spending some money on a poll, polling for name recognition and things like that. And so I talked to my boys and my wife, and my boys were like, do we have to come to campaign events? I'm like, no. Like, oh, okay, we're good. And so my wife, she went to work. That was a Sunday night at the dinner table. She went to work Monday. She came back home. She looked at me and she said, John, I'm really excited for you. There was a notion for me up until that point. That point was when it was like, okay, I'm in. I've got my wife, I've got my kids. And so that was the only poll that I really needed. Very quickly on endorsements. I have very purposely not sought out the endorsement of our mayor or our city council. The reason why is because I just resigned as chair of Mira Mesa Community Planning Group. And you've probably been listening to some of the stories about development and controversy about development. We've got this massive development in Mira Mesa. And I have told every single member of the city council that they need to look very hard and carefully at how they work with our communities. And so I'm not going to compromise my position by asking for their endorsement.
The next question will lead off with Mr. Canada. Every day, 22 veterans kill themselves. What specific reforms will you do to help our veterans?
Thanks for that question, actually. Having been in combat, just as Jackie has, I see the toll of PTSD. I mean, my wife even said to me after I've been out on get out there, I mean, how do you cope with it? What do you do? I mean, it can be times where you have constant terror. Rockets coming in, mortars, people IDF firing at you. Now bring all that home, and people are suffering. People who have PTSD should be taken more seriously, and they should be at the head of the line when it comes to VA care. 27 veterans took their lives. That's despicable. That's absolutely despicable. 22 a day. They need to be at the head of the line, get the medical care they need. Now, how do you do that? I don't know. Because I tell you what, it's more complex issue than saying you should do this, get to point A to point B. We need legislation, we need well thought out legislation to put them at the front of the line so we get them help. Whether it's medical marijuana to help them ease their pain, or any other thing that comes out of those tragic, horrible scars of battle. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson.
I would start by ensuring that when people call for help to the VA, someone answers the phone. As you all know, a lot of that has been going unchecked, and people are calling in. Veterans who've served honorably and protected our country are coming home to silence on the other end of the line, left voicemails that have been unanswered, and that is unacceptable. We need to change the system at the VA from the top to the bottom. Even the Secretary of the Veterans Affairs Administration is wrong in the information that he provides to Congress. He is unaware that there are in fact 22 to 71 days of waiting time for veterans to get the help they need, and he's been saying that it's 3 to 5 days. So this is a system-wide problem that requires accountability, much greater congressional oversight. And we need to be certain that we ourselves are not taking care of just the veterans who are our top priority, but also the families that are impacted by the sickness and the mental issues that come with those who've been affected by PTSD. Thank you.
Mr. Horst?
From the very outset of my campaign, which started in December, I have been advocating for a rescheduling of marijuana from DEA Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. I'm advocating for a 5-year renewable reschedule, which means Congress will have to revisit that 5 years from now. That is the single best thing that we can do for our veterans who are struggling with PTSD. They call it Operation Overmed, where they are being completely bombarded with every possible kind of medication. They're on some really nasty stuff and it's not working. You mentioned the stat, 22 a day commit suicide. We look at the veterans who are making moderate use of medical marijuana, and the suicide rate is all but zero. A 5-year renewable reclassification will give us the time to do the research, and I believe the numbers will be absolutely compelling 5 years from now. The debate will be over, and we will be able to get our vets the care that they need. And lastly, I'll just repeat what I said before about the VA. 2 3-page bill, return every single employee in that department to probationary status and get rid of the ones that need to be fired.
Thank you. Ms. Atkinson?
I know we've touched upon this earlier, and everybody up here is extremely passionate about this issue. And to caveat what Mr. Horst said, some of you know that I'm a wounded warrior. It's not easy to talk about, but I was blown up and I was medevaced out of Iraq. Well, let me tell you, when I was medevaced into a tactical hospital, you know what they did? They threw me in a corner and handed me an enormous Ziploc full of drugs. And most of those drugs, suicidal effects. That's why we lost 27 veterans under the age of 45 here in San Diego. We have to stop over-drugging the veterans and get them the help that they need. And that is just the first step. And then we need to reform the VA. But nobody should be on a waiting list, particularly those with PTSD, TBIs, and those that are in need of help. That's what I want to change.
Thank you. Ms. Atkinson, you'll lead off with this next question. What have you done to engage Latinos in the political process?
Well, the first step, absolutely, is I joined LAPA over a year ago. So, you've taught me very well, and everybody here has. But you know what? We have a saying in the Marine Corps, and for the Marines out there and the service members, everybody's green. I see everybody as people. I've engaged the people of the 52nd District and the people of LAPA, the people of our community. I don't see color, and I believe we're all green, just like we were in the Marine Corps. So I will absolutely start from day one to help everybody and every single constituent, not just to special interests or pander to people.
Thank you. Mr. Canada?
I cannot stand racial divides. I'm so sick of hearing about it all the time. I really am. I hear about the Rainbow Coalition. I hear about this. I hear about that. You know, I'm with you, Jackie, on this one. I mean, I see people as people. I don't like these dividing lines that we put up. Gosh, I have Latin American friends. I have folks who are friends from India, Pakistan. I don't see that color. I don't see that, you know, oh gosh, you're my friend because you're Chinese. Oh gosh, you're my friend because you're Latino. We're all Americans here. We're all people. And that's what we need to start focusing on. We're people, we're folks that need to work together to get rid of this ridiculous stuff going on in Washington, D.C. We're being had. They're pandering to the wrong people, and they're dividing us. We're better than that, folks. We are better than that. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson?
Well, I guarantee you President Bush saw people as well, but he also understood that there were issues that had never been communicated to the Latino community, that he felt a special burden and a desire to reach out and say, you're not only welcome here, you're invited to participate in our democratic process. Many people of all backgrounds come from backgrounds where they do not have an opportunity to participate in the democratic process the way we are raised to believe as our inherent right. And so it is our job not to change our principles or what we stand for, but to engage every community and meet them where they are at and explain why what we stand for matters so much. When I worked for President Bush, when he was governor in Austin, Texas, and I ran 28 states of Latino outreach, it didn't matter whether or not I was Latino. What mattered was that I spoke to them and listened. I wanted to hear what they had to say about our democracy. And because of that desire to listen and to understand what mattered to them, we got 39% of the vote, which was a record in Republican presidential history. Thank you.
Mr. Horst?
Over the last 8 years, I have been advocating for my community of Mira Mesa at all levels of government. One of the things, the challenges that we face on a planning group is getting volunteers to join and serve on our group. We don't really, we don't target different communities Mira Mesa's got to be one of the most diverse communities in the county here. It's a very strong Asian population, very strong Latino population, and we have people from all walks of life on our planning board. And so that, if the question is what have I done to help Latinos engage in the political process, and being the chair of the planning group and actively recruiting new members so that they understand the landscape of decision making at the local level. I'm the only one up here that has a background in the landscape of decision making at local government level. The only one who really understands what local leaders need from their representative in Congress. They need initiative, they need leadership. They're not getting it from this gentleman who obviously isn't here. I'm the only candidate up here who has that background.
Mr. Horst, you'll lead off with the next question. The debt ceiling keeps going up. What will you do when a president asks to raise it again?
Say no. Scott Peters has a bill that he put in last October. Scott Peters says, oh, we need to count the national debt only by the debt held by the public. What Scott Peters is saying is that the debt held by the Social Security Trust Fund shouldn't count. That's 15% of our debt, folks. That trust fund is there so they can sell their inventory of treasury bonds when they need that funds to pay our retirement benefits. I'm 48, I'm not that far off. And so Mr. Peters has this proposal. It's the most shockingly dangerous and ignorant proposal that I've ever seen come out of Washington, D.C. It's got that man's name right on the top. Okay, if we are asked to raise the debt ceiling, the answer is no. We need to put the debt service first. We will not default. We have more than enough money to pay our debt service. We don't have enough money to pay our debt service and paper over the deception of borrow and spend politicians like Mr. Peters.
Thank you. Ms. Atkinson.
Our last debate, we had yeses and nos, so it was pretty easy throughout because we just came from Coronado debate. No, absolutely, and I would advocate for cross-party lines to ensure that we vote no on that. So that's easy. I would not vote to increase the debt ceiling.
Thank you. Ms. Gitson?
Jumping all around,
I
Dee. So every one of us in this room has a job to do in our personal businesses, in our houses, in our personal checkbooks. Every one of us has to balance our budgets every single day. But for some reason, both Democrats and Republicans who are equally complicit in this, because they've been in charge as well, have not been responsible stewards of our money. So if all of us can do it in this room, why is it that we do not expect Washington, D.C. to do the same? And so I've already gone on the record with the chairman of the House Conservatives Fund in Washington, D.C. He asked me that was his first question. Would you vote to raise the debt ceiling? And I said, absolutely not. I'm not there to make friends. I'm not going to Washington, D.C. to make friends. I'm not there to be bought and sold by Washington. I'm there to represent you, the taxpayers of San Diego. Thanks.
Mr. Candidate.
Boy, let me tell you about the debt ceiling. My dear wife is a bank manager in our house, and we definitely have a debt ceiling. I can't get away with spending anything that I'm not supposed to spend. I get questioned and interrogated about the ATM bills. Now, let's put that in perspective. That's how we should be running our government, right? We should have a debt ceiling that we should stick to. Why in the heck do we keep going back saying we need more money, we need more money? If I say that to my son, if my son says that to me, I say, go pull some weeds. Put some money in your butt. But seriously, the debt ceiling is one of the things that keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. And what really disturbs me about it is the fact that we keep talking about it. We keep saying, let's spend more money. Oh no, well, we'll put a ceiling on it. Well, wait a minute. Do you realize that the debt ceiling also affects our credit rating in the government? It affects more than just how much money we're spending. So, you know, I'm for the Canada debt ceiling program. You don't spend any more than you can. Thank you very much.
Next question, and we are going to start this one off with Ms. Gitson. How do you plan to compete with Congressman Peters?
Oh, what a great question. Well, again, I'm certain that there are Democrats and Republicans in this room, and you should know that this is not about party lines or party affiliation. This election is about the future of our country. And Scott Peters, his beliefs fall right in line with someone who I fundamentally disagree with, and that's President Obama and Nancy Pelosi. Scott Peters votes 85% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. He's one of the 12 most vulnerable Democrats in the nation as a result of his voting record. Not because he's not a nice guy, but because he votes on the wrong side of the issues for San Diego. He's a limousine liberal, and we're going to go after him every chance we have. To amplify our message, you have to have money in order to get your conservative message out. We have raised $425,000 in the last 5 months to help me get our message out so that we can have a level playing field with Scott Peters, which is absolutely essential to making sure that voters know exactly what they're voting for when it comes time in November. Thank you.
Mr. Horst.
Folks, this year money's not going to do it. This year is not going to be a kind year for people who are coming to this race from, I'll just say it, the Karl Rove Super PAC establishment wing of the party. It's not going to be a good year for that. And in our district, 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Independent, give or take a point or two, that's too small of a slice of the electorate to be able to credibly go compete with Scott Peters. And it really doesn't make any difference how much money you have. We need a candidate who is going to be able to debate Mr. Peters on all of the major fiscal and monetary issues. We need a candidate who understands how the bond market works and how the bond market values things like the Social Security Trust Fund. I'm that candidate. We need a candidate who is going to be able to debate Scott Peters on the local issues and why we're not getting the initiative and leadership that we need in Congress. I'm that candidate. We need a candidate who is not going to be trying to swing the election with one block or this block or that block. We need a candidate who can compete with Mr. Peters for every vote. I'm that candidate.
Mr. Canada.
Where is he tonight? That's my question, really. Golly. I have a background in tax law. I know how the fiscal system works, and I know how broken the tax system is, all right? If we got a guy that surfs on that system, Scott Peters, he doesn't care. He endorses bills that spend more money and push the average American down, the middle class. Secondly, he's not a former member of the military, a veteran. How can you understand what veterans are going through unless you've been in that position? He's been a guy that's been in politics all of his life. Somebody said to me he was a great city councilman, but he's not doing much as a congressman. We need to erase that. 52nd District needs somebody who's going to get in there and is going to fight. But he's got experience, and gosh, I'm not a limousine Democrat. I don't have under $20 million or whatever he has in the bank. I have what I have, 110, thank you, 110. I don't have that. I'm a normal, average guy, wife, 3 kids, and I feel the pain. I've gone through everything you guys gone through. Let me help you out of it. Thank you.
So how am I going to beat Scott Peters? Well, I'll tell you right now, we just put out a poll, a very fair poll, that ran the Republicans against Scott Peters. And in that poll, I'm the only Republican that can beat Scott Peters. I have the highest crossover appeal. My bio matches the district, and I cannot wait to get on a stage with Scott Peters. I can't, and we'll see. DCCC is here tonight, and they're taping us, and I'll tell them just like I told them at the last forum. Scott Peters told me, Jackie, this city is full of career politicians. You should have been in city council last year, or 10 years ago. Well, you know where I was? I was in a fighting hole defending this nation. So he's going to have to try to explain that. He's going to have to explain why he has failed us in foreign policy. He's not attacking the Islamic extremism. He is not securing our border. And he is sure not taking care of our veterans. And I will do that, and I'm the one who can fight him and win this district. Thank you.
Mr. Canada, you'll lead with this next question. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unemployment rate for Hispanics 25 and under is in double digits. How can you help younger Latinos get work?
Well, that's a great question. I don't look at it as how we can get more Latinos back into work. I look at it as how we can get American workers back into work. We have a huge issue with the unemployment statistics that we have that are panned out. I've heard 5%. 5% is what we're standing in nationally for unemployment, which is a bogus number. Now, there are other communities, the Latin American community, Asian community, which are suffering higher numbers. The fact of the matter is, I just don't see this necessarily as a Latin American or as an Asian or as an Irish issue. I mean, if you get down to it, it's an issue where we need to put everybody back to work, and we're not doing it. And we're not doing it because we don't have the right programs for everybody. Our educational system's failing. That is a key to pushing everybody forward, all right? It's just not about one group or another. It's about pushing everybody forward with the proper education, work programs, university, everything to push people back into the workforce. Thank you.
Ms. Gibson.
The key to success in life is education. We must start at the most basic fundamental part of a child's development and ensure they have equal access to education that isn't run by the teachers' unions that are unaccountable, that actually enables them to succeed and be trained for the jobs of tomorrow. And that's true whether you're Latino, and that's true whether you're any other background. And so I would focus on making sure that every child has an education that's determined by their parents and the community to be best suited for the jobs of tomorrow. At the same time, I would also make sure that things that we do in government, federal government doesn't disincentivize productivity. If you look at our tax code right now, we tax things that we don't want people to do. We tax tobacco because we want people to stop smoking. When we tax productivity, which is exactly how our tax plan is now, our tax system, it disincentivizes people from getting engaged in the workforce. And that has to change. So that's exactly how I would address the work issue.
Thank you. Ms. Atkinson.
We have to stop killing business. I know we have a lot of business owners in here today. We have to stop over-regulating you. Let's start there. Then we can create the jobs, increase the incentives, particularly for hiring veterans, because they're slim to none. There are not great incentives out there for hiring veterans. So let's stop breaking down our free market enterprise and breaking business owners and putting things like the minimum wage upon them so that they have to absorb that. I will work from day one to ensure we limit the role of the federal government in your life, and I believe that that will end.
Mr. Horst.
As I was growing up, our parents would say to us, if you want to be wealthy, build a better mousetrap. And as I talked to my older son, he's graduated from high school this year, I asked him, I said, do you know what that means? And I asked some of his friends. Nobody knows what that means anymore. So I've decided to kind of turn that around and say, if you want to become wealthy, brew a better beer. It's the same thing, okay? Now, what's happening, and this is the reason why there's two reasons why Latino young people have a higher level of unemployment. The first is because of this money laundering game that we've got going on between Washington and Wall Street. There's a little money laundering game, and the money is not going to the wealth creator, the craft breweries. When we get money to the wealth creators again, then there'll be job opportunities. And then the second reason is because of student debt. Most Latino young people, I believe, are the first to go to college in their family. And their families don't come from means, and so a lot of them end up getting into student debt. A lot of these young people should be our job creators. They should be our innovators. They should be our next generation of small business people, and they're stuck in mom and dad's basement because they're buried in student debt. We need to fix that, and I have a plan to fix that.
Thank you. Ms. Gibson, we'll leave with you. American Apparel will lay off 500 workers due to the aggressive minimum wage hike. What is your position on the issue?
I think that the headline that I saw, it was in the LA Times, said the exodus has begun. And that's exactly what's happening. You see, I'm a business owner. I started a small PR firm 3.5 years ago. And for the first time in my life, I experienced all the things that I learned about in Republican politics, but never really knew for myself to be true. And when you have the perception, even the perception, that government is going to put its foot on your neck and hold you down to prevent you from reinvesting your profits, from growing, from investing in your employment base, when we are unable to get that foot off of our neck, whether it's from regulations or it's from taxes, we all lose. And California is a place that my parents came to experience the Golden State and the American dream. It is no longer the case that we can call ourselves that. That's a travesty. I can only control it to the extent that I'm able to in Washington by setting an example of how all government should be run at the state, local, and federal level by taking that foot off of your neck and letting you thrive. Thank you.
Ms. Atkinson.
Again, I told you I'll keep it simple. So I do not support the minimum wage hike, and I believe there's a lot of unintended consequences with that. We've all read it, and I know we've discussed it in this room in several LAPA meetings. So no, I